Thanks. Dr. Sarah Babb is the founder and MD of STEM. She might tell us a little bit further about that as we go along. Sarah, I will let you take it away.
Thank you so much. And I'm really so happy to be here with all of you. Very informal. I really encourage you to type in the chat. This is very much a session for you. It's a time to reflect on your brand and identity and your way forward. So I will be flexible if questions come in. We'll have a breakaway group. We'll have as much participation as you like. Feel free also to have your cameras on if you want to engage in that way, or unmute and speak as well. So very much a engaging session. I'll have some key questions along the way. But thanks for the introduction and opportunity to be with you. So I call myself a pracademic. So I work as a faculty with Gibbs and have been working with leadership development and organizational change for over 15 years. Have had my own business in skills development and futures thinking. But for now, very much looking at identity development, which is actually the topic of my PhD. So a topic I'm very passionate about and really believe is important for us in whichever profession we're in, to be conscious and proactive about creating how we want to be in the world, what legacy we want to leave, and what impact we want to have. So I will share some slides. We'll go through a structure, but again, really invite you to take a moment to pause. I know we're always busy and focusing on so much and deliverables and outputs and tasks, but actually give yourself permission to just think about yourself for a moment. When did we last take time to think about ourselves and where we are in our career journey? So it really is a chance to leave with some practical insights, but also to think of some practical steps to take it forward. So let me begin. This, as I say, will take us through conversations around where we are in our journey, to take a moment to think about what is our brand and identity in this profession, and how do we build trust in order to build influence and power, because none of us work in isolation. We're always working with colleagues or a team or clients, depending on where you are in the business. And then linking it back to your authenticity. So what is an authentic brand for us, and how do we wield that to grow influence? Please do type in the chat. I might ask Natalie and Kate just to flag if there are any questions or hands that come up in case I miss it, but I'll keep checking in on that as I go, because when I share screen, I don't necessarily pick that up. What I might ask you to do in the meantime is to type in the chat. If you joined this with a particular question in mind, please do type that in the chat. So what is your curiosity in this conversation for yourself? Please type in the chat a particular question or a particular comment that may be on your mind in this area. I can now see the chat. I've just pulled down the box, so I'll respond to those as well. Having said I've got a structure, as I say, this is your session, so I really will focus on what your needs are. This slide is a little bit busy, but I want to start off with a premise of what's known as the leadership pipeline, which in essence says we move from being managing ourselves, and we may continue in terms of our career. I've worked a lot in the mining industry, more so than others, so I have a particular, I was sharing fondness for the geoscience professions, because your career is specialized and you bring so much value. And you may find, though, that you actually shift towards managing a larger team, and to actually being perhaps in the advisory space. So each of these transitions, see if you can relate to where you are in this, might mean that you have a turn of passage to manage others, which requires a different sort of capacity and a different sort of identity, really, from being the specialist in a field to leading a team in the field. So as much as we're aware of this, it helps us build the right skills so we can have the right impact and get the right results from the team and for the organization that we're with. You may progress to work on different levels of the business, but that might also be a choice that you make then in terms of transitioning to more general management or staying in the specialist route. Neither wrong nor right, but really helps to keep reflecting on where am I in that journey now, and where might I want to move to? So that's just a premise. This is a lovely framework I work with quite a bit, about helping us understand where we're at. And maybe by default, you then became to managing others and wondered, what do I need to let go of? What will help me in this transition? And what new capacities do I need to actually build to help me with this? So I think particularly in your field, this is a question to really consider. And I see a question coming in about building trustworthy contacts and networks so that you can be built in that. And that's exactly where we come to in terms of understanding what is your brand. If you're a trusted brand, like we have some trusted products, so we know that certain brands will be trustworthy, others might be less so. Whether it's a car, you might think a Mercedes is more trustworthy than a Tata, or you may think that a certain product is better positioned than others. So the same goes, the same goes for yourself. Are you building up a sense of being that reliable, skilled professional in the field that people know they can turn to? So you would be that go-to person. And the interesting thing about brand is that we can consciously create it. So it isn't given. We actually evolve throughout our lives about where we are in our life stage or our career stage, or even in the organization that we're in. So this is exciting because it means you can be quite intentional. So today I'll prompt you through some questions. So I urge, you might be busy on site, but I urge you to have a piece of paper or a tablet that you can at least note some of the questions, if not some of the answers for yourself. So when you say you want to build a trustworthy network of contacts, it's also understanding what is it about me that's trustworthy. So why this matters is that it also means it'll give you a reputation and a legacy in the business, that you would then get access to greater projects, greater opportunities, even access to mentors, and even potential career development. So even if you're not conscious about your brand or your identity, I can bet you that you already have a reputation. So rather be aware of what you want to create and then build and craft that as you go, than just falling prey to opportunities or other people's perceptions. What we're all wanting is some sort of sponsorship, some social capital, some networks that can help us achieve what we want to achieve, but also on a personal level to grow. So when there is a good brand, when you've got your clear identity, and you can actually, the outcomes would be that you have a presence. So when you are in a meeting, when you're in a project, when you're swaying a decision, that you would be respected in that conversation, that you would be included in that conversation, and actually that you could even influence people in that conversation. So it gives you greater power, actually, if you have a clear, authentic brand for yourself. And for you, it's to decide on what is that North Star, what is that objective that makes sense for me. So having a brand is important, but let's go back a little step in terms of saying that already you have a lot of brands. Let's call them identities. So maybe your bigger identity is made up, maybe you're a jogger or a runner, or you've got particular hobbies. Maybe it is that the specialist is a bigger identity for you. Maybe it is that you are a leader, or you have a team, or you're a lead in your organization or community. Or maybe that you're also a partner, a sister, a niece, a nephew. So knowing already that we have many identities and that they're constantly evolving depending on where we're at is quite helpful, because then we get to decide how we want to actually build that. Do we want to really grow the specialist, or do we want to grow that we're also learning, or that we're evolving in our management career? So just to reinforce the point, I love David Brooks as an author. He's written books on character, and he talks about it's not actually innate or automatic. Isn't that interesting? So we might have a prevalence or some strengths, but it doesn't mean you have to be. So if you grew up being helpful and supporting other people, it doesn't mean that has to be our only identity. Or if you grew up as being a natural connector, bringing people together, you can really sit and reflect on what are those strengths, and we'll get to those questions in a moment, and how can I build them. So you're really building your own narrative about yourself. And we're reminded of Carol Dweck, who talks about the growth mindset. You know, neuroscience is really teaching us that our brains are flexible, that we have billions of neurons in our brain, and that the pathways of repetitive thinking get formed. But what is so exciting that we know now with neuroscience is that we can form new neural pathways, we can form new habits, we can actually form new beliefs. So the growth mindset is saying when we're in our development in our career, that we go into it with a sense of curiosity. So where am I evolving? Who do I want to be? Who am I becoming now? That we learn from challenges, that we always see there's possibility, and that we know that it is never fixed, that we actually don't have, it actually an old myth that we have a fixed mindset or way of seeing the world. And to me, this is so exciting. So really, you could even think about every 5, 7, 10 years, reinventing yourself. You know, we're in this complex, fast-changing world. And how do we ensure that we remain relevant, I think is very important, particularly also in your field with the use of technology and the advent of AI and digital transformation to assist you in the role. But how are we consciously also staying up to date? So here's a really useful framework you can use from the get-go about building a triangle of trust. If we have these balanced, the research has shown that then we have influence, and we're able to actually wield more power because we are trusted. And the apex of that, I think we're most familiar with, is I will be trusted if I know what I'm talking about. I'll be trusted if I can actually complete a project or a piece of work successfully. But that's not all that counts in terms of your brand and your identity and your trustworthiness. So we also need to look at, on the left-hand side of that triangle, is authenticity and confidence. What do we mean by that? If you are working with somebody, they get the job done, but somehow you feel like they're talking different stories to other people, or they are unsure of themselves, or you hear different stories from them, you'll feel a bit that they're untrustworthy, that they're not consistent, and also that they are reflecting different persona to different people. The opposite of that is that if you are able to identify clearly, this is me being authentic, I can feel confident in who I am, in what I know, that is an element that builds a lot of trust. And we know that intuitively as well. So some of the questions I'll prompt you with shortly are, what is that authenticity for me? And how do I manage showing up as authentic? And that looks different for different people. So it doesn't mean you have to be the extrovert and the loudest person in the room, or dominate a conversation, or interject all the time. It might mean that you are just that soft-spoken, thoughtful, reflective. It looks different. But if you feel like you are solid and aligned internally, then you're able to position your perspective more clearly and consistently. So I found it really interesting when I first came across this thinking, was the third element of this trustworthiness. And that is called different things, but essentially it's about, I'm good at my job, I know who I am, or who I am right now, but am I actually caring about the other person? When I share this information, is my intention to empower you, to answer your questions, to solve your problems, to include you? And if you think about it, if you go to a doctor, for example, they might be really competent. They know technically what they should do with you. They might be confident that they're a doctor diagnosing a particular issue, or a surgeon. Let's talk about a surgeon even. We definitely want them to be competent. We want them to be confident, but we also want them to care. And we'll tend to go back to the doctor that has bedside manners, that can actually also be sure that they're addressing your need, not just their medical need. So for us then to think about, and we'll break out in a moment when I put some questions, is do I have a balanced circle of this? And back to that question of building a network, if you're seen as actually we want to build a network to grow the field, to grow the profession, a bit like JSSA is doing really well, it also builds your trustworthiness. So in your workings, you can really be thinking about, where is my triangle perhaps a bit imbalanced, or do I need to put my attention? So how do we get to, and in a moment I'll break you into breakout groups just of 3 or 4, so that you can really consider some of these questions and then come back. So let's look at the authenticity and the confidence. Being authentic means knowing where you're at the moment, and that changes too. Isn't that interesting? So if you're studying or you're focused on your particular career, some of those values might be, if you're now looking at perhaps your social world or other opportunities, your values would reflect differently. To be authentic, you also want to look at what is my differentiator? What is my particular strength? And what evidence do I have of that I can almost bank and say, this can give me the confidence that this is what I'm really good at. This is my differentiator, and I've got evidence of it. Because sometimes what happens with strengths is that we're really good at something, but we don't share the strengths because they think that it's natural for everybody. So maybe you're really good at critical problem solving, but because it's natural to you, you don't think to share it or look for evidence of it. So we almost ironically downplay our strengths. Can you relate to that? And when you get together and you look around, you go, gosh, actually, that was something unique that I brought, and I could really build my confidence around that. So here are some thoughts in terms of building your portfolio of evidence. You could be really banking what projects, what your approach is, really exploring what are some of those unique strengths that are big. You could be looking at building and contributing to research or publishing in those insights. So instead of just banking them, you're also growing your contribution in that particular field. And I wanted to bring an analogy that maybe you'll relate to, and I'm definitely not an expert in, but how do we get to unpack those strengths? Part of it in those values is to look at what lies behind or beneath the surface. So apparently this is the Grand Canyon stratigraphic map. And we really want to get to what are those values that drive us from the inside out. Because amazingly, when we are presenting certain behaviors, we come across as shy or get angry at certain things or present ourselves in a particular way, it's driven by what's beneath or below the surface. So we may have had an experience with a particular group or in our past, and we may then actually be projecting that. So another way of looking at it is an iceberg. So if you think about your life experiences, where you've performed well, where you're able to be confident and show up well, it's driven by those deeper experiences. What happens then is that, say, for example, you are nervous to speak up in a meeting with executive members because of an experience you've had. That'll show up then when you're in that meeting. Or if you were brought up to be quiet, to be seen and not heard, then maybe we don't ask questions or bring in critical thinking, or the converse. But what's interesting is to then say, if I'm going to be authentic, do I know what those core values are that drive my patterns of behavior? Do we ever take a moment just to reflect on, actually, some of these beliefs might be outdated for where I am in my career at the moment? So if I understand that I've had some experiences that may be limiting, we may even then be wanting to say, what is the opportunity to let go of some of these in crafting my identity and brand to be authentic? Maybe some of those are outdated. So here are some of the questions I'd like you to think about in terms of your personal power, and we'll break into groups in a moment, is when we are under pressure, do we feel like we express different values, or can we still hold who we are? Can we keep that triangle in balance, or do we resort to, when we're under pressure, that our values are tested and then we just resort to being command and control or reacting angrily to a supplier or a colleague or a team member? Or can we keep maintaining our own sense of core, who we are, what we believe in? Can we manage our emotions so that we can have a presence and an influence in the room? These are the questions that are really helpful for us when we're looking at our identity. So can you please take a screenshot of these? I'll break you into groups literally for 5-6 minutes so that you can have a moment to consider. I'm just trying to find Kate where the breakout room group has gone. There we go. And I'm going to assign how many are in the room. 20 groups of 3. Please join your group for 5 or 6 minutes. I'm going to actually make smaller groups. There we go. And answer these questions. Just briefly go around the room. What do you think it is that If you had 3 words to best describe yourself that is unique, what would those be? Chance for each of you to share, ask questions. You can come back and reflect on that in the bigger session. I'll close the rooms after 5 minutes. Even though it says you're going to have 12 minutes, you won't. Please join those rooms, and literally you're going to just explore. So what do I think is authentic? When I'm my best self, what are some of those things that I can join? If you're in a situation where you can't join the rooms, don't worry. You can stay in the main room, but otherwise I'll close these smaller groups after 5 minutes max. Okay, welcome back. I think everybody should be coming back now. What came up for you in that conversation? I'm hoping you were talking and not just sitting in the groups, and it looked like you were. Please share with me what came up for you in that conversation. And if you've got questions or comments, feel free to unmute or type in the chat. I'll give you a moment to do that. Yeah, I think what's interesting about these questions, I'll look out for some other comments too, is it's definitely a lifetime question. So your strengths will evolve. And the best way you ask a question also is about how do you know what you're really good at, is to keep trying different things. And that's the growth mindset. Really take on different variety of things, even if you wouldn't know if you know it or not. And that's the curiosity. The invitation in this world that's changing so fast, companies are changing so fast, is to actually be able to try many things, experiment with different projects, try different skills, say yes to things that you wouldn't know, be open to asking for support and help, because we only know through doing. So that's what's interesting. We know our strengths when we can actually try something out and realize that we can learn it and grow it. And we'll also know that those things that come easier to us are our strengths. And that's often why we miss it, because we think it's easy to us. How did I miss that? I see you said it might be easier chatting to people you know. That's an interesting comment, because part of showing up is actually being able to have a presence and being able to share in different circles. And I think that's part of influence, is sometimes we do hold back, and there could be opportunities if we share in different circles. And ask questions and be curious about each other can really also be a form of presence. So I learned that a while ago. So is that sometimes asking questions is also a form of influence. So really good questions there. And these are things that you can keep on your agenda to help you going forward. I put this in just because I think it's interesting, but maybe you do too, is that with our world of AI and digital transformation, we say, well, what are the skills left for us as humans? And the interesting thing is that the skills of being human are what are in demand with technology. So the skills around new leadership is, how do we deal with ambiguity? How do we influence people? How do we actually bring in empathy in our people management? So the skills that we are looking for developing for ourselves as humans in this complex world is critical problem solving, creativity, people management, and empathy. And these might be natural strengths I think you have in your profession already, is sort of the ability to research, analytical thinking, critical thinking, problem solving, also creativity. And so these might even be some of those things that you don't necessarily name as part of your strengths, but are actually CVable skills that actually are needed by every organization, which is so interesting. So keep this as an open inquiry. You can even keep these in the back of your mind. Who am I most proud of being at the moment? So with those different identities, you may be at home one way, at work another, with friends another. Like, when are you most, I love this saying a colleague had of, if you're standing proudly, like, when are you your noblest, shiniest self? And that's really your authentic, when you feel that you just are able to flow. And part of understanding the iceberg is also understanding, or below the surface, is what is holding me back. And maybe there's some self-limiting beliefs, like I can't speak up, or what if I stand out too much, or I can't be seen as being critical, or I don't want to be seen as arrogant. Or it's really just to consider, is that helping me in my journey or not helping me in my journey? So I hope that these are really useful and very practical prompts that you can work with in building your identity and your brand and your presence. Another skill that can help you moving forward is that, yeah, absolutely, we doubt. Sorry, I just seen your comment. We doubt ourselves, and that's part of learning. So, one opportunity of reframing that is to, instead of going into, I'm not good enough, I don't know enough, I'm too young, I'm too inexperienced, or I'm still is to reframe it and go, how brilliant, I've got all these things to learn. What can I learn next? Or let me bank what I already know to help build that inner confidence, that inner sense of alignment, of self-belief. I was actually at a women's conference 2 days ago, and one of the senior executives of a big corporate was saying she's banned the words for herself of imposter syndrome. Imposter syndrome, when we look around and go, are you sure it's meant to be me here and not somebody else? Absolutely, these things can hold us back. So knowing your own beliefs, knowing which ones don't serve you, and really building up evidence that shows that you don't need to be in that place anymore. Here's a playful tool that you can work with. It's called this power of 3 stories. So when you're thinking about your next step or how to step into your presence, is to go, there are different ways I could expand my thinking. Maybe there are 3 options that I could take forward. It doesn't have to be fixed in one way. So being playful is a really another capacity. Being curious, being playful, asking questions, exploring, experimenting are all part of this exciting journey. So you could almost write down 2. What are the 3 possibilities that could come forward in me going forward? So I want to talk for a moment about presence, if that's okay. And presence starts with understanding your own emotions and what drives you. And what we're learning about our brain is fascinating. So there are 2 parts of the brain I want to pick up on. The one is the front bit, which is the prefrontal cortex, is where we make decisions, we plan, we have executive decisioning, functioning, where we think through issues, problem solving. But deep in our brains is what's called the amygdala, which is our ancient prehistoric part of our brain, the oldest part of our brain, that actually drives our fight, flight, fright response. When we are in a stressful situation, all of our body, our energy will go to the amygdala. What's our automatic reaction? Fight, flight, or freeze? Now, that doesn't necessarily help us when we want to have a presence and have an influence. So being able to manage your emotions, being able to calm your nervous system down, allows the blood to flow to the prefrontal cortex, which is where we make decisions. So a big part of having a presence is actually being aware of, am I letting my emotions drive me, or am I actually able just to take a breath, calm myself, and let the energy and flow to the prefrontal cortex? Did you know that your brain is the organ in the body that uses the most energy? Isn't that amazing? I wish that correlated to weight loss, that my brain worked all the calories, but it doesn't work that way. So when you're thinking hard and you feel tired, now you know why. So having a presence then means being able to come to the prefrontal cortex and being able to actually calm your system down. Body language, Amy Cuddy, who was in a slide earlier, did research and studies globally and really found that your body language also determines how you feel, not the other way around. So even if physically you're just able to stand calmly and straight, you can manage that presence in a meeting or a stressful situation. Being prepared, having clear preparation also helps with that. So at the moment we've covered identity, we've looked at presence, and now I want to talk a little bit about influence and social capital. This third leg of this topic is about, I might be trustworthy, I might be present, but I actually want to be able to influence others. So the first part of that is also understanding who are the stakeholders that I work with and how do I build relationships. It's all about relationships in terms of influence. Social capital is like the trustworthiness that you build amongst a team or an organization. So in other words, in your family, there's some people you know you have more social capital with, you can ask more favors, you can give more, you're happy to give more to. So the same in a business. The more you have relationships, the more you have stronger sense of social capital, the more there'll be a sense of influencing, being able to ask for help and being able to give support to. And the first step of that is knowing, who am I working with? Because sometimes we only focus very much on the task and we forget to look at around who are the other people that we actually need to consciously build a relationship, introduce yourself, ask what their needs are, how you can support each other, how you can work together. And then you would really be looking at how do you tailor your messages with those groups? So how do you support the finance person? How do they support you? What relationships do you need when it comes to asking for more budget or really reporting on certain uses of budget, for example? It really does help in terms of your social capital and having a sponsor or a mentor or somebody that you can really connect to in the organization. There should be somebody that's able to support you, whether you're there or not. And sometimes we're shy to ask for that. So that's another idea. And part of building a relationship is not just receiving, but also giving. So who else in your organization needs it that you can share ideas, lessons learned, insights, research, findings? Because oddly enough, what they've also found with influence is the more you give, the more people are likely to want to give to you. So relationships are very much two-way, very much about give and take. And that's so important when it comes to building influence. So first step, look at who do you want to build relationships with. Secondly, look at what do I give to them and what do they want from me. We sometimes shy away from this like corporate politics. I don't want to play these games. But actually, businesses are people. And the more you have relationships, the more you're able to have a presence, you're able to influence so you can get more results done. So it's also a bit about reframing in your own brain. How do I work with this? So in your mind, again, can you note down where there might be particular relationships that you want to build going forward? And I think if you are newer in the organization or newer in your career, it's the perfect opportunity to do this now, to say, I'm new to this business or I'm new to this field. I'd love to understand more of what you do. Could we connect for 15 minutes or over a coffee? It really does stand out, and it also is a good way to differentiate yourself if you are just starting out in this career. And of course, it's all about the growth mindset. Are we learning about ourselves in that? Are we learning about others? Now, again, if you feel a bit shyer or more introverted, this doesn't have to be done in a big way. It could be done online, or it could be done in different ways. You're very focused on your work, but we mustn't forget when we're moving in our careers and moving that we look beyond just the task that we're working on. So I hope again that this is a practical tool that you can take forward in building your social capital in the organization, even in the profession. I think the fact that you're already here and part of GSSA is fantastic. There's so much around connecting with other colleagues in the industry too, and looking at trends and being able to position yourself as relevant into the future as well. And that also helps build your trust in your own ability, that you actually are positioning yourself so well in the profession and moving forward. So it's an encouragement to keep doing that. So here's another thing for you to work with. So when you are meeting people or connecting with them, here is a bit of a template for what do they call the elevator pitch. So the elevator pitch is about saying, if you get into an elevator on ground floor and you know that it goes up to the 5th floor, you've literally got that amount of time to position yourself to whoever's in that lift. It's quite a helpful tool to get to the kernel of what is my brand, how do I want to come across. So even if you're not going to do this in an elevator, at least you have it as a practice exercise to get to understand yourself better. So what you would be doing is following the question of, I help. So they say, hello, who are you? Or you say, hello, I'm so-and-so. I help. And then you would fill in who or what or how. Make better decisions, which ones, or I help the team by doing what. And that's the result that I have. So I'd like you to just think about that for a moment. If you had to get in the elevator, so what we don't want to do is get in the elevator and say, I'm Sarah Babb, I'm a lecturer, because that won't necessarily see in terms of the value I add. So you would say, I help professionals be more influential by building their skills in influence, etc. So the question, how do you come across as non-threatening to people who have been with an organization for a long time? Exactly. I think you've answered the question there, Natalie, already. So it's really is about saying, I'm here to learn, I'm here to support, I'm here to add value, which is where this comes. I'm new, or I'm still understanding the ecosystem of this client or this job or this company or this sector. And I'm wanting to really contribute or complement in terms of where you're going, especially with intergenerational gaps. I think there's also a way of taking responsibility to open those communication channels. I think the more you are authentic and clear, and remember that third leg of the triangle, that you're doing this because you care, you're not doing it just for self-interest, comes across really clearly. And the idea is that everybody's needed in terms of the wisdom and the experience of people, but you're also remember, what is your unique differentiator? You're bringing fresh perspectives, you're bringing new questions, you're bringing innovation, maybe even latest techniques or cutting edge use of technology, for example. So you don't shy away from that, but with those three legs, you're also saying, I'm confident, I understand my skills, or I'm learning my skills, and I also care in terms of where I come in. So I think that's a good example of using the trust triangle in a way of not coming across as threatening. And also, if you're showing that you're willing to learn, and part of willing to learn is that we're actually willing to fail. And that is where sometimes we shy away a little bit from, can I learn from this older or let's use a long tenure person that's been there a long time? Are you willing to try new skills, and are you willing to ask questions in terms of, I'm not sure, or I don't know, or can you share with me? All of that is actually about sharing a little bit more of what's beneath the waterline, and that's about building trust and trustworthiness. So the elevator pitch is really, again, just, can I be understanding of myself and the things that I bring across, but also that I'm in a growth mindset and that I'm learning. So important. And you know what? You can also experiment with, how do you try these different approaches and see what different responses you get. Here's some micro habits that you can use in terms of taking these skills forward, and see if any of these are useful for you. One of the earlier comments in the chat was, maybe I doubt my ability. So one of the things to do is to actually look for evidence that proves your ability. Often we're our most harshest critics. We say things about ourselves internally that we wouldn't let anyone else say about ourselves. So one of the things we can do is actually to say, I'm going to step into a space of learning, of stretching, of growth mindset, of actually banking the strengths that I've got. So you're opening your brain. There's actually neuroscience tells us that the brain readiness is opened by questions and by looking at stretch goals. So set yourself 3 goals of, what can I achieve? What's next for me? Keep learning, keep growing. And the proof can absolutely be unquantifiable and intangible to Melo. Maybe it's a goal of, I want to feel confident to speak up in a meeting, or maybe I want to feel that I've built a relationship with, or I found a mentor in the business, or I've learned a new technology skill. Absolutely. These are personal completely. The idea of having this as a micro habit is you're training yourself to keep stretching your identity, your brand, your presence, your influence. The more you do this, the more you'll actually be relevant and the more you'll be adding value. So you're quite correct. This could be any goal. This applies for personal goals too, by the way. For any of you that have tried to get into a fitness routine, it doesn't help just having it as a wish. We need to actually set up a goal for it. Also, having a routine of learning and reflection. I've put it there, update your proof bank. You could almost have a jar and you could write in it all the positive proof points, the affirmations of things that you've learned, that your strengths, that you get comments of, that you get feedback on, that you feel good and proud of. And then that's a lovely way to keep coming back to that. You want to have your own after action review. Maybe even that's when you're driving home, or you have a moment after work, because you just think to yourself, what worked, what didn't work, what could I do differently next time? So you know what, these are routines about your own personal development. That's why I said at the beginning of the session, this is your space, this is your time to look internally about, who do you want to be, Who do you want to be known as in this field? Such a powerful skill that we have. And it's about banking that and growing. Networking is another micro habit. This is one thing I think we all maybe shy away from, but you could have it as a goal. Have 2 coffee. I don't mean this is worded wrong. Have 2 coffees with sponsors. It almost sounds like you need to sit down with the sponsor and have 2 coffees. I mean, have 2 sessions, coffee meetings. Set a goal of doing that, even if it's an expert in the field or somebody in the company or even just a colleague that you studied with. Keep building relationships. Your reputation gets known, and you also are positioned as that person that's learning and adding value. And then, of course, your metrics. So what would those be for you would be quite different, right? And you get to decide how you would know if you've built that or not. So then everything's covering up. Yes, let me stop sharing for a moment. We've got other conversations to come and see what questions you might have. Which tools are you finding would be most useful for you? So to summarize, we've got the iceberg tool where you get to understand who am I, what drives me, what do I show on the surface, how do I come across. We've got the trust triangle that you really to build your brand is to make sure you're focusing on all legs of it. So what is my competency and ability that I'm coming with and growing? What is authentic in terms of who I am as a person, what I believe in, what I'm passionate about, what my goals are, what my values are. And then we've got the empathy or the care side, which is saying I also care about getting the best results, about excellence, about building a team, about contributing to the success of the project or whatever that might be, that comes along as well. We've got the tool of the elevator pitch in terms of let me just find a phrase that you can fine-tune and saying, this is how I want to position myself. And then we've also got the reflective moments, the questions that you can take with and saying, who am I most proud of being? How can I be my most noblest, shiniest self? That phrase actually comes from a colleague, Wendy Palmer. She's passed since, but she used to use Aikido, the martial art. She was a black belt master of Aikido. And she was about 5'3", slim, thin lady, grey hair. And you wouldn't believe it, but I'd watch her throw a giant of a man across the room with barely breaking a sweat. Because Aikido is the martial art where you use the energy of the other person to deflect, to defeat themselves, basically. And she used to say, having a presence, so there she would be, this small, petite woman facing these big warriors. And she would just say, I would always be saying, I'm my shiniest, noblest self. And I love that phrase because that's really what we want to be. How can I keep shining what's true, what I know about myself, and what value I bring? Such a good reminder when we have critics, and worst of all, we have this internal critic that can hold us back. So hopefully these tools gives you a chance. Keep them have a journal, have a place where you can just keep checking in. Who am I becoming now? And what do I want to step into being? Can be such a liberating experience, actually, to know that we can craft this quite actively. And you're quite right, those questions won't be answered all at once in one 5-minute conversation. But at least by having those questions in your brain, you will start to look at, there I'm doing that. Oh, wow, I feel really good in that situation. Let me see if that's a strength that I can claim, that I can name, and that I can bank as saying, this is a strength that I can work with. And I do suggest journaling or finding a way of keeping it written down or tracked, because then you can also see over time how you've progressed and grown. And that's so rewarding in and of itself. So I see another question. How does one overcome if your weakness are used against you as a means to highlight your incompetency, whereas you were asking for help? Okay. So I think number one, we've got to check our own way of speaking, of thinking about this. From what I'm understanding from that question, maybe you asked for a question and then that was said, okay, you don't know how to do it. I think the one thing is to, when you're framing questions, is also to be saying, this is what I can do, this is where I want to grow. So you're quite specific in answering that, but I would not take on the narrative that you are incompetent or it's a weakness. So if somebody's throwing that back at you, maybe there's an opportunity to speak to them one-on-one and say, for this and this reason I asked, and you do know how to do it now, or it's not an issue, and you would appreciate their support going forward. Again, I'm not sure of the context. I think it means remaining true to yourself, that you are learning, that you are growing, that you asked for help. It's perfectly valid. And if it's used against you in a one-on-one situation, I would follow up on that. If it's in a group situation, you can decide whether it's appropriate to call it out at that stage or rather go one-on-one with that person that's done that. You in your heart of hearts know it's not a weakness, that actually you are actually showing a strength, a growth mindset, that you've been bold enough to ask is a strength. And don't forget that you're over this other person who maybe for their own iceberg. Remember, we don't know other people's iceberg as well. Why they did that might be that they did, according to that previous question, felt threatened or unsure, and that's their own iceberg, right? So we can't take it on, but definitely stand up for, in a non-judgmental, non-threatening way, just to say, yes, I did ask that question and now I know. Thank you for sharing, or at least I've followed up in this way to find out, or I've tried it this way, and yes, I think we're always learning. So I think a great question. Don't let somebody else's judgments or assumptions tarnish your shiniest, noblest self. And we don't need to make it a confrontational thing unless, that's what I say, I don't know the exact situation. I hope that's helped. What if you stay in a small community far from any true influence beyond the company you're working with to try and network more? Oh gosh, Estelle, great question again. There's lots you can do online too. So you might, through GSSA or other activities like this one, be building other relationships. And you would be intentional to say, who do I want to network with and why? And particularly, I think it's a good point. Sometimes you're out of sight, out of mind when you're on, you're not in the main company. So there might be strategy meetings or group team meetings or other ways that you can connect back to people in the main company, so to speak. What you can also do is, in that small community or on site where things are happening, is you can start banking your evidence points for yourself to be saying, but the opportunities to do a lot in a small community are here. So you might have a bigger portfolio because it's a smaller site, and that's something you can then bank and say, I've actually been able to do this. So there's opportunities in that too, that you can begin to build your brand and your identity. But a good point. So it does take some effort, or maybe there's particular gatherings that you could then make a point to join back with, so that you keep your relationships fresh across the business. Why? Because it brings other opportunities and it gives you a chance to build your reputation going forward. I can't believe we've only got 5 minutes left. I'm aware I've done a lot of talking. I so appreciate the questions. Let's see if there's any other questions or comments you'd like to tackle. I did just want to remind us of the other sessions we've got booked. In October the 30th, we're looking at building flexibility and resilience in the workplace. So how do we sustain performance and well-being? Because I think it's also a balance. We can be performing, but we want to be able to sustain it, that we can also have a sense of well-being and to continue growing and learning as we go. So we need to be flexible and resilient. So that'll be the session in October. And then November, we're looking at some of those future fit skills. So how can we maintain our relevance and our career readiness, that we always one step ahead of the curve, so to speak, that we can be really standing out in terms of that. Let me know also if there are any comments for those topics that you want us to particularly fine-tune or focus in on. And as I say, I'm really flexible to do that.
The links to the following sessions again in the chat for everyone, in case. Thank you, everyone, for joining us.
Thank you. And I think that's such a good point. You ask about how do we build influence in networks. This kind of platform is exactly that, right? Where you can say, hi, I'm so-and-so. You're already creating a presence. So don't underestimate, like, all of these channels are just a lovely way, even in a safe way, to practice speaking up, to feeling comfortable in your owning your space, asking questions, commenting, challenging. It's a nice opportunity to experiment a bit, stretch your comfort zone. So yeah, I look forward to to next conversations and yes, stretching ourselves. We're always learning.
Perfect. No, just once again, Sarah, thank you so much on behalf of the GSSA and SACNASP. You mentioned the mentorship programs, also very, very good thing to be a part of. Unfortunately, the SACNASP and GSSA program, they've run into a bit of a delay this year, but we should have it up and running again next year. So everyone keep an eye out for that. And yeah, thanks again. We'll see you in the next one.
Thank you so much. Go well.